Okay. I'm actually gonna reload this. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hello again.
Hi.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to present today, but I can go over some of the things that I mentioned in Slack.
Yeah, that would be good just to go over some things and have discussions on them. And I think that'll be what we'll do today. I have some things to present.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello. Hanson.
Good morning.
Okay.
Morning,
So, yeah, I guess we can start. Then, if other people come, they can join in. Welcome to the meeting. This is sort of the end of the summer, so it's been a pretty busy summer for everyone, I think. Um, any news or announcements people want to make before we start?
School starts Tuesday.
Good. Hopefully, yeah, Jesse.
Excuse me. Yeah, I'm kind of in a semi-vacation state, um, which is nice because I haven't really had something like that for a while. I don't have any immediate deadlines or anything like that. So I'm still going to my day job. I'm kind of in vacation mode, which is much needed and nice, and I have people visiting me, and that's very good. Um, uh, but that said, um, hello. That said, um, you know, I, there's so much that's um, being churned around and brewed in my mind about a lot of the different specific projects that I want to focus on and flesh out. So I'm kind of in a slower state right now, but at the same time, in like a week or 2 weeks, I'm going to have a lot of things to really be. I have a lot to pursue, and I was talking a little bit about this to Anson a couple weeks ago, but like I think I have a pretty clear strategy for basically what I want to be working on in the next year of my time in the lab and in general, because I'll be applying to graduate school stuff, in this cycle, and I have no idea what's going to happen with that, and I don't think anybody honestly does, given the state of everything that's going on, and especially in this country. Um, so I mean, I'm just mentioning that, and I think Bradley knows that, and everybody else here pretty much knows it anyway. But with all of that said, all these disclaimers in mind, it's like I have a lot of. I really feel like compared to when I came to the lab last summer, basically, I feel like I've really grown a lot in terms of, oh, I like research and I like these fields and here's some things I want to do and here's applications to um, a much more aware of my place in the space of topics and looking forward to really like I'm excited. I'm excited to really build that out more. So that's my general update. And it's nice because I've had that consistent desire to start moving in a direction for a little bit now, and it's been great to have Neuromatch Academy and Neuromatch series and the Neuromatch community, frankly, has been huge for the summer. And the Brains Mind Machine MIT summer school was also very nice and great for meeting people. There's a pretty good overlap between the people too. But those weren't, that was like basically 6 weeks of prep and study and engagement, which is like the majority of my summer, which is great, but it wasn't the same thing as kind of working on the things that I was talking about. So it was sort of like time away, to focus on that stuff.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's like all these things are feeding into it, and that kind of leads into some of the stuff that Brad and I have been talking about, the things we want to write up. We're writing up the iClear blog post and those sort of things. Those are all kind of flowing in the same direction, I guess. And it's like like I said earlier, for the people here, I don't have a lot today. I don't have a lot of I don't have a tremendous amount of lab manager updates in general either. But like as far as myself, I might talk about a few opportunities that have come up. There's the summer schools and the database. There's a paper I looked at. It's just some things like that I might say when the time comes up.
Okay.
But that's my update in general. But do you want to say anything, Aksh?
Not much. I came across this, the webinar or something by Dan.
Oh.
31st, I guess.
This workshop?
Yeah, just a minute. Give me a minute. I think it's something like
Dan Goodman?
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's spiking neural networks as universal function approximators by Dan Goodman. Yeah.
I think what I might do, and I would ask this, like Bradley might kind of say this, I sort of have a web page for the lab, and I wonder if I should start creating some of those. Because there's this flowing stream of activities and opportunities that kind of affect the lab, and that's one of them. Should I put something like that in that like Notion page thing, database, or maybe just make a Slack channel that has
I think Slack makes it fine, right? Like we can have a channel where we can pour in all of whatever things we gonna have in near future or something into one channel, and that could
Yeah, I think that'd be good for the lab. So much of the academic thing and stuff like this is like seeing an event, a deadline, should I apply?
Anyone else getting a lot back up?
I think it's obnoxious, and I'm talking, like when other people are talking, so but it's fine. But yeah, thank you for that, for sure. And I don't know where Bradley wants to go next.
Did you guys join with? I'm sorry. You guys start with your slow pod or something? Because my Indian time slow pod just split up, but a group of people are not trying to pour in something, and so there's another group, and they're trying to read things in weekly basis and stuff. Is your slow pod things going fine?
Honestly, I haven't started yet because I had like a holiday vacation, so I'm kind of on vacation for a week, 2 weeks, and I'm actually put something later this week, but I had my plans changed slightly because I could basically feel like a vacation. So I'm a little bit delayed from what I can do, but I still will be doing that for sure. But it might be a week or two out. But I'd be curious. Maybe we could talk, or here even now. Your experience has been, or what's worked or hasn't worked for that.
Okay, yeah. They just formed another group asking people's opinion and stuff, and the group just split. And it seems Conrad is helping us. I don't know. There's some group kind of, adding things. I don't know. I don't understand what's going on. I just said I'm okay, fine with joining people. It doesn't matter to me. It's because a day's thing we're going to read for a week, so it's fine. It's totally fine. So.
Okay, maybe if you could post something about that, I will I don't know if I'll join. Just to kind of see how it works.
Yeah. Okay, that's all from me.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so yeah, that's good. A nice update. So a couple of comments on that. So Jesse, yeah, I've seen your Notion page, and I've gotten invitations, but I haven't been able to edit it or join it or something. Keep sending me emails about joining Notion.
Oh yeah, I think you need your own account and then do stuff. So
yeah, I think the do stuff part is where I don't know what I'm doing, so I have to figure that out. But otherwise, I like it being able to have tables and things like that. And do you think you could share your? Do you have it pulled up or?
Oh yeah, I can get that right now. There's for Notion. You can do it in a web app sense, and the page will look different when you're editing it. Obviously, kind of like WordPress.com kind of a thing, or I think Wix and everything else. And there's also a desktop patch, which I'll open now, and time to share my screen. Okay. Here. I'm just gonna share this entire screen. I know there's special glasses dancing, but you look like a badass, and
I have a light migraine, so it helps with a lot with light sensitivity.
Yeah.
So I assume you guys can see my screen at this point.
Yeah, I can see it.
This is like a very simple lab manager's page. I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but I'm still working out what things should be public or not in some of the databases here. But this is the the direct editing version of the page, and that's going to do some active projects, which incorporate the ongoing projects in the labs with the link, and I was going to put some tags and people there if they wanted to be there. It doesn't really matter. I'm working on some onboarding materials in general that I've mentioned, sort of associated to the season of docs stuff that we're going to do, and an events page, which I may do a few different versions of this because we could do. It would kind of be cool just having a list of events that the lab, quote unquote, in some form has participated in or another. This is stuff that I've mostly participated in, and some other people have as well. But I know, I think Rashab, I think he's been involved in a lot of things. So, I mean, just saying, places where the lab has had a presence was one thing, but also just this or variations that could easily become a database for things that we're looking at. And I know that's kind of related to the proposal section in orthogonal lab, which is a pretty good resource in general. But having things listed out in one spot may be helpful. And this could either be an internal, or an external, link. It doesn't have to be a public there's something to be discussed. It doesn't have to be a public, facing website necessarily. It could be just for people inside the lab, which may be useful. And just be like a conjunction. There may even be sort of like I don't know if it's like an if this then that sort of a deal. Probably, I don't know how Notion will fit with that, but anytime someone adds a link to the Slack channel, I could just put it in here too. That was like an upcoming event that people would look at, or that could be part of emails or general discussion or whatever. I think that should be part of our general weekly meetings. Like, hey, did you find any events that would help benefit people in the lab or that people might want to apply to? But it kind of already is. It's just not very formal. So, those are just work in progress for this. But that's all for now.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the list of events is great. I also think though that we should have a Slack channel for it, like for people to announce things that are upcoming that they find out about, and then that way you have like a place where you can go and compile them.
I was thinking about that in the sense of like I have an events discussion channel, which is basically specifically to discuss. It's sort of like live tweeting, but just discussing stuff, or like I put a lot of stuff there, and I will probably put some stuff there. And I think some others have. There were like some updates. I don't know if they were exactly in that channel, but there were some updates recently about events people were at. But that's kind of what that channel is for. And I don't know if it should be called like events news or news events or any channel name ideas. I'll make it just right now.
I think like something like events news would be good because it's like, I didn't know what events was. So I mean, it's like people might not know what that means. Like they might think it's something else that's not relevant to them. So, and then you might announce it in the general channel so that people know that like you can put things there.
So events-news is good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah, so like the Dan Goodman workshop would be one thing to add to the list. And I think like that list in general, we can have like if whether people in the lab participate or not, it's always good to have a list because you can like say something comes up on an annual recurring basis. Maybe we want to check it out again this next year if it's happening again, if we miss it the first year. Or if you want to have like a way to like figure out what's going on in the community, if you know that there are like certain events that are happening or people, contact people, it's easier to find out. Like you can Google those people or those events or, something like that so you can get a feel for what's new in the... Because there's stuff that's not going to be like announced until it's too late. And so if you're thinking about like attending some event, it might be useful to have like a database of things that you can, okay, let's see what this was all about or what if this is going to happen this year. And now, I guess I was going to talk about a couple things that we had discussed on Slack this week. So Rashab is still, he's not going to join us this week yet. He's still working on his materials. And so we'll probably hear from him in the near future. I mentioned to Jesse that we were going to do, so I'm serving as an editor for something called The Gradient. So it's thegradient.pub. Let me show you this thing in chat. Yeah. Okay. All right. And this is if you open up your link, I guess I can share my screen here. Just a minute. All right. All right. So this is something called The Gradient. It's a sort of a blog, but it's not quite like the Distill publication, but it's a blog that some students from Stanford started a while back, and I'm on the editorial board there, so I'm sort of on the inside. And they publish these articles on machine learning. So there are all these different articles on machine learning. There's compositionality, which has to do with language and simulating language. It's more of a linguistics piece, but there's a good amount of cog sci in here too. So there's challenges of comparing human and machine perception. That was a pretty good article. Let's see, GPT-2. So Gary Marcus published sort of a rebuttal on GPT-2 on this blog, and so I wanted to point out that they have articles like this, which is NeuroIPS getting too big, and so this is sort of in the vein of what they're looking for in terms of content. So they're looking for articles that are technical on different topics. They're looking for things that might have some connection to maybe cog sci and connecting cog sci to AI. Some things on straight up AI, like what do we can we analyze, sort of do a meta critique of AI or an analysis of it. And then they have things like this, which are basically like reflections on conferences. So this is Andre, and he's he has some things to say about NeuroIPS. He's basically comparing it to a Rolling Stones concert, or that's someone who's maybe a little bit older than Andre, comparing it to a Rolling Stones concert. And I think all of you probably don't remember when that was a big thing, but yeah, the Rolling Stones used to have these massive concerts. And so that's sort of the point that they're making. So, this basically just considers the point is NeuroIPS getting too big. And it's not quite as big as SFN, but they're basically this is a position piece on this topic. But you can see that they feature the workshop pretty prominently in the post, kind of going through some of the things that go on at NeuroIPS. And so the reason I bring this up is because I asked Jesse if he was interested in taking the iClear update that he had presented in lab, and he has some materials on that, and turning that into sort of a reflections piece of some type. And, is suggesting that instead of just basically a recap of iClear, which you could do, to also intersperse some neuromatch reflections in it. And so, it would be like where you'd talk about what happened at iClear, your favorite moments, and then maybe also reflect on neuromatch as like sort of maybe a comparison point or a some other way. It really depends on how the writer decides to do it, but that would be. And then Anson and Ashk and anyone else who's watching this, if you're in the group, you're invited to join in. If you have something to contribute, we can put it into the post and shape it up into something that's maybe about 2,000 to 3,000 words. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what that would look like. The first thing we need to do is basically get the draft out, just to kind of put down, have some images, have some text, and then have some sort of logical order to it. And then we can go from there. So, any thoughts on that?
I think, excuse me. I think over the next week, I'd like to. Well, honestly, sooner I'd like to have just a very simple sort of a draft about stuff, or like just big bullet points. And like, I think I was the only one at iClear, but I mentioned I still will write my own sort of like specific blog post for Neuromatch Academy stuff. But this may be a good opportunity for people who are at Neuromatch, which I think is everybody here. If you want to add some commentary on your time in Neuromatch, that might be, I'll try to create some obvious spaces where like, oh, here's where your comments can be. So that's cool, and I'll try to I'll put that somewhere in Slack, and hopefully the next week and kind of solicit comments for those things. And definitely encourage like anybody who's interested in writing. Like I'm interested in writing pieces like this in general, so I appreciate Bradley for kind of seeing that and offering an opportunity. But for other people who are interested in this kind of writing in the future, I'm really interested in doing more of it. So feel free to share or find those ideas, and I don't know if that could be maybe like an events thing in the lab too, like the channel we talked about. But I think there's a lot of opportunities like this, and yeah. So look forward for that. Excuse me. Look forward to that the next week, hopefully.
Yeah. Any other comments on that, or? Okay. Yeah, we did a group blog post in the DevaWorm group last fall, and it was on pre-trained models. And we just did this. It was like just basically going through and writing out this. So we were doing this session on DevaWorm AI, which was melding sort of machine learning and developmental biology, which is the focus of the group, sort of the focus of the group in general. But we, settled on this topic, and then it was about a 3,000 word post. And blog posts are kind of different from writing a paper. You have a lot of images. You have to break things up because people don't pay attention to like huge word blocks when they read blog posts. As maybe it's expectation, but maybe it's also just that it's just to keep people like from tuning out. And so it's definitely an art to it.
Yeah, I think that's also like in some of my like I have a few different projects and applications under the guise of like what would like a full stack scientist like a scientist, a science communicator be able to do. And I feel like this is being able to write articles of different kinds. Like you have your papers, you have your sort of like like the gradient is definitely like it's a blog post type, but like it's a serious blog post. It's not like and then there's sort of like some of the articles that I would write on Medium, which are more like really public. You could say top science, but public facing. Any of these degrees of knowing your audience and how to write for that, I think that's actually a really important skill for people going into sciencing and research and stuff. So.
Yeah, I think everyone would benefit from that sort of practice with writing, and that's, I think, a good thing. I like your idea of full stack science, but I think it's also important to remember that, like, as you're learning this stuff about technique and about like knowledge about, say, like neuroscience or whatever, or computational methods. It's always important to also learn how to read and write, and also present things. When I mean read, is how do you read a scientific paper? What's important, what's not important, and then how to synthesize it. That's always important. Yeah. But also writing your findings and thoughts, in a similar fashion. How do you put together these ideas and say, I'm going to create some new knowledge?
It's definitely its own art form. Like, as someone who like started out, what got me into research was a great in-depth paper writing experience with my first ever research PI at UAlbany, Dr. Kim, who, I always tip my cap to that experience because that was awesome. But since then, there's so many different ways to go about it, and stuff that you need to know, and the more you do it, the better it gets. There's this very particular art form to it that has to do with like knowledge of the philosophy behind everything, but also is like you can draw on that or not draw on that, and there's just a lot of like, like Riley said, knowledge creation. It's sort of its own like there are many different ways to go about it, and I think the more you get to do it, the more you get to see it. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to join in this or other opportunities as possible.
We have anyone else want to ask any other questions at this point?
There are a few things that I might mention after this, but I don't know. Like I know you have like things to present later, but there are like a few things that I might highlight from my week at some point. But
yes. Well, Anson or Ash, do you have anything you want to bring up or mention in the meeting? Like any news or topics you want to discuss?
All right now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Then Jesse, why don't you give an up? You said you just had an update on some things.
This is definitely like I'm gonna take it really easy and share my screen and share Slack. Is this? Are you seeing the right screen? I think you are.
Yes.
Okay. I have a few. So I kind of made a silly post yesterday that I'm thrilled to be going to Oxford later this month for the autumn school of neuroscience. And that was just because I was in a mood. But I am technically going to Oxford in the summer school. And I'll put this in the chat. I think this might apply to pretty much everybody here, but it's a 2-day summer school. This is the Eventbrite ticket. It costs nothing. I'm not actually going to Oxford, but I was sort of just having fun with that. And I made a series of GIFs about that. People are kind of reaching out and saying, yeah, please share events, because there's a big need for that, honestly, especially people trying to get into it. Rashab had his GIF, which is I approve of. Another GIF, which I approve. Oh, another one. Please, in the chat. It was in our Slack. If you're seeing this, hey, we're all going to be there. How about that? So I'll put that in. I'll put that in the Slack now. Hey, I'll follow my example. Great. So cool. We have the channel set up. It's working. That was the main thing I wanted to say. But also, there were this is a really cool resource. And it's meta everything. A meta resource of meta resources for cognitive neuroscience. A lot of people share this on Twitter, and there's some discussion about it, but as I mentioned here, it's a nice way to get cognitive neuroscience is sort of a topic related to a lot of our interests, but they have different ways to contribute and get involved, and I won't go into all that now. I'll put this link just because it might be a little bit harder to find than the other one. I'm sure you can find the other chat, the Oxford event. But this is just metaresources.org. Yeah, things for online learnings, which is kind of what we've been compiling. Positions, fellowships, workshops, summer schools. Like these are really great things to have here. I'll put this also in the Slack. And I did it in the wrong channel, so make sure you're in the right channel when you post stuff. Don't be a noob like me. So there you go. But yeah, this looks very cool, and slightly inspiring for some of my other projects too. There was a few other things that I wanted to mention. I'm totally being a slacker about just using my Twitter for this. this is really interesting. Also, Tony Shimero, who we've talked about a lot in the past. Don't tell anybody never read Hegel. So yeah, that. There's a lot of I'm posting on Twitter some postdoc job openings, but I don't think apply to anybody here. And last thing I wanted to mention, but I don't know where exactly it is. I have read a chunk of. I think I've read most of this paper here. Can I just do this? Sorry. This is a very cool paper. Josh Bongard, I'm very familiar with. He's at University of Vermont. Somewhere over here. And he does a really cool course. I'll do half and half. If you don't know Josh Bongard, he does. He does a lot of things about evolutionary robots and evolutionary computation. So he's kind of an interesting figure to keep in mind for a lot of things that, we talk about developmental, AI, developmental brain vehicles. So he's a bit different take on it, but kind of just mentioning this for anybody who's watching this, or like if anybody sees the video and is like, oh yeah, that's really cool stuff. I'm interested in that, or would like to talk more about that. There you go. But this is a really, I think it's only 2 pages, so I imagine Bradley has read all of this if he did. But synthetic biology is a really big topic in general, and he explains, bioblocks, xenoblocks, which are related to essentially having sort of living machines with the Xenopus laevis. And he goes into detail what they do. I really like his ethical aspects about it, or at least mentioning it here, and how do we consider this morally speaking, and research for humanoids, and he focuses on ethics and applications, ethical aspects of support, and potential applications for use and misuse. So I think this is a really quick article that I think pretty much everybody in the lab would benefit from reading, just because we touched on a lot of these adjacent things and what we've done. But this is sort of like, I really like these sort of pieces that give perspective on trajectories. Like that's kind of my jam in some ways right now. Like a lot of my frontier map and a lot of my broader projects is like, what are the trajectories? And this is sort of a very quick take on, synthetic biology and what can be done, and what should we be careful of as we're doing it. So I wanted to mention that came up before. I don't know if that's something Bradley's going to talk about later or not. I might have stolen his thunder. I don't know. But that's pretty much the main stuff. I've been updating my personal website, which I don't need to show here, but it's really great to sort of do that and have I really would like to encourage, or we talk more about having just like a project, being project based in your research. I think is a good thing. Just learning how to, because everybody pretty much does it, but knowing how to talk about that and do that. Like I'm gonna quickly show my website because just to kind of do it. Okay, this is cool, but like having this section, and fleshing this out a bit more. And this is like, imperfect and older stuff. But like getting to a place, I was really inspired by a few people that I've met at different events this week, or people who are presenting at Center for Brains, Minds, and Machines. Like they've very just seeing their website and how they talk about stuff and present stuff. I think it's always really great to see. Sorry, I know this is dragging on a bit, but it's just one thing. Like I really enjoyed Rose Wang's website and her work, and she does really interesting work with Josh Tenenbaum, who we've talked a bit about. But like this kind of a setup here, where you have your paper, your video, the resources who you work with. I feel like that's a really good way. I'm not saying everybody's website should look like this at all, but more like thinking about it in a sense of, if writing for the gradient or a research paper is one way, this is a very specific kind of writing too. Like this is a very simple way to communicate certain information and show that you've done these projects, and I think that's that's a really great tool and skill set. So I made a little bit of progress there. It's not done. I'm not like a big time Notion. I'm not saying I'm using Notion right now because it's fun to explore, and it's easy for me to do it. But I think anytime people want to talk about that, I kind of associate that with. I know Riley would too, but I think it's important that as like a professional development part of the lab, that's something that I'm into really talking about and thinking about how to explore that or ideas and so on. So that's the last thing I'll mention for today. Stop sharing my screen if I learn how to do it. There we go. Okay.
Well, good. That's good. Thanks for that update. There was a lot of good stuff in there. Thanks for the paper. I wasn't going to present on it, but I'm glad you did because I got to see that. The other thing about I agree with you about websites and developing an effective website. I've tried to do that over the years myself with varying amounts of success. And other people have different strategies for presenting their research. I like the one I like the style where you have like the paper and the sort of the graphic on the left-hand side so that people can get a sense of, what the research is about. So a lot of times you'll just see like a traditional CV, you have a list of publications and there are a lot of inscrutable titles. Yeah. Sometimes no one really appreciates what's in the paper, and so to have this thing that sort of unlocks the what's inside the paper is good. Let me see if I can maybe go to my web page here. We can look at that. So this is my web page, and this is just one way of doing it. Let me share my screen. So this is my web page here. So what I've done here in this one is I have links at the left, different things that you might want to go to find out more information. But in the middle, I have this sort of animation. It's a carousel of images. And so I've made these slide cards for different publications. This isn't the same thing, but it's sort of, you have this publication and then there's information, and this graphic shows, information about the paper. So it kind of gets people interested in what the paper is. And this has the authors here, the title, the location of the paper. And then, you can go into like the CV and you end up with this. I have a little chart of where I've been in my career, and then you have these different links that go to the different parts of the CV. It's like some of them are, like you have these things listed here with graphics. Use a lot of graphics, I think, is one thing you can do on the web that you can't do in a traditional CV. And so that's, I think that's an effective way, but you can develop your own style, but I think it's worth exploring as a general rule to sort of get a handle on what works best for your research, but to also, have like give people a better idea of what it is that you're doing. Just providing people with a list of publications, it doesn't necessarily excite their imagination, but you can do things like, put images, or you can actually go into a little, maybe, sub, write a little profile of the work and, profile it that way. I think it definitely goes into that full stack aspect of being an academic or being like a researcher, whatever you want to call it, being able to do that. So, I mean, you don't want to oversell your work, obviously, but you also want to give some background to people who don't know. They always talk about the elevator talk, which is like a 2-minute talk on things. Can you describe your research in about 2 minutes? And so people will, they have to sort of hone that. And I think that's, your website is sort of like a elevator talk for your research. If you have like a good website, people can go and really get a very quick recap of your work.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of learning, and I think earlier this summer I mentioned like the demo or die concept, which is maybe really more like deploy or die, but being able to like, I think the website is a good tool, and being able to kind of, from what I read, there's an article explaining, how demo or die came about or something like that, which basically means, people coming into a lab, and you don't have a lot of preparation, and it's like, hey, whose turn is it to present to these, funders or investigators or whatever who are looking at the lab, and it's like, okay, well, what are you going to show them? Because they're coming here in 3 hours, just ready to go. And it doesn't have to be the greatest thing in the world, but it's like the ability to know how to communicate that, the ability to understand what the person you're talking to, your audience, wants or needs to see, and to prioritize that information above the deluge of everything else that's going on. That's like getting to a higher level of your craftsmanship, of your ability to do that. And that's something like, people talk about that, but it's hard to, I'm sure there are some very good workshops somewhere about this sort of thing. But when I was like coming through undergrad, and now that I'm here, this is the best environment for it that I've had mostly. But I mean, it's sort of like these are different skills to think about too as you go through a career, or even just like, yes, there's career aspects too, but also just like, how do you act as a responsible purveyor of information, and to further learning and understanding stuff too. So it all fits into that.
Yeah. So then the other thing we haven't talked about yet. There's been sort of a discussion, mainly between Jesse and I, but another context as well, about developmental AI or developmental neurosimulation or whatever you want to call it. So I know Jesse was reading some things on this topic, and so that's something maybe we'll want to revisit in future meetings. I don't have anything to present on it this week, but I wanted to get some thoughts about that. Basically, the idea is, you have, say, like a neural network or a deep learning network. How do you get the thing to learn sort of de novo? So you have this network that learns, but it can learn things that it's seen. So, you give it data, it learns about the data. But how do you give it things so that it has sort of like a common reference frame, so that it incorporates knowledge that it's seen into something that, like what humans do. We have innate processes that, and some people would argue about how innate our conceptual frameworks are, but we can basically put things in different conceptual categories. And so that's one of the arguments for sort of like this building an innate framework for an AI. Now, people have approached this in different ways. They've used symbolic methods like building a symbolic framework or representation framework for things to go into. So you sort of build the categories from scratch, or you might build some innate feature like that, or you could rely on something like development where the AI interacts with the world and they have like these periods where they acquire information and then build the scaffolding that you then build upon as you go through time. So, and people have approached this in different ways. A lot of the there's been a lot of inspiration from developmental psychology. There's been some inspiration from linguistics and some of the things that linguistics has offered in terms of solving that problem for, say, like humans. We ask the question like, is language acquired completely from the world, or is it there's some sort of like some sort of universal thing that we all share that we just kind of fit into linguistic categories or something like that. So there's a lot. I think cognitive science has said a lot about sort of that debate, but there hasn't been like a clear answer. But moreover, there hasn't really been a clear answer in terms of how you would simulate it or how you would build an artificial intelligence that would have those features. And so I think there might be another way forward on that, and that is that we have, we have sort of, we can build like an innate system for an AI. So we don't have to follow human cognition, but we want to be able to build something that has this ability to develop. And so I think development, and I don't think just developmental psychology, but other like developmental biology and even sort of an evolutionary approach is maybe the way forward. And, I'm not saying that it's like the killer app, but it's something that is, I think, worth at least exploring or sort of contributing to in that way. So there have been people who have done this in the past. I think in the critical periods talk, I talked about like where they tried to build like a developmental structure for deep learning where they would associate words and concepts over time. Or, you might have like, you might start out, say, with like a naive theory of the world and then build upon that as you add in knowledge. So like a naive theory is where you have this basic set of reasoning capabilities built in, and then those reasoning capabilities would be built upon over time. So like there's an argument, I think, that babies have like a basic concept of physics. So when a baby's born and they start interacting with the world, they have this basic concept of physics, but it's not a fleshed out concept of physics that we have as adults, or certainly as maybe if you were a physicist or if you worked as a plumber or something and you observed a lot of physics and you knew kind of how things worked. So you have that model in your head. You're not born with that kind of model, but babies have this sort of naive view of physics where they basically know things are going to happen. Sometimes, they're surprised by things, but that's the nature of the naive theory. Now, that's something that's a starting point from where you can start to think about how you might have some sort of developmental representation. And then from the developmental representation that allows you to build categories and things like that. But it goes beyond just like sort of the way the machine thinks. It may actually be involved in the sort of the topology of the network itself. And so a lot of the stuff we've been doing with developmental Bradenberg vehicles has focused on that sort of the development of that topology, going from maybe like one node to a bunch of nodes. And then, that builds complexity, and then that complexity can be used as a way to process information from the world. And so, we're going to talk about that in subsequent weeks. I just wanted to bring that up now because we've been having a discussion kind of, it's very informal, but it's something that we'll probably follow up on. So if you're interested, please let's continue talking about that in Slack.
So what would some what would the field be called of looking for innate underlying categorical structure?
Well, they've done it in a number of fields. There's been like developmental cognitive science, which has always been interested in this area. And we have a couple of the citations in the Developmental Brain Vehicles paper. Linda Smith is a person who's been a long time proponent of this area, and the idea that it's almost like this synactivist view where you have this, the world is built from interacting with it. So you have this some innate thing, you have a body, you have a brain, you have some innate feature, but most of this is like your brain as an innate thing interacting with the world. And as you interact with the world, you learn about it, and that shapes the brain. And there's like developmental cognitive science. There's like I think there are areas of embodiment where they talk about this. I'm not familiar with any authors who really focus on this.
Yeah. A question.
Yeah.
When you say Smith, is there a specific, because there's a bunch of Linda Smiths in the world, what is there like a paper or something that this one has done that I could look at?
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have some of the citations if you go back to the Developmental Brain Vehicles paper.
Okay.
And so there's that area. There's also developmental robotics, where they try to get they try to develop robots basically. They do this not like as a machine that's actually changing, but they usually develop a controller offline, or they maybe build a robot that has like that basically will learn from their environment. It's there are different strategies for doing that, but there is an area of developmental robotics.
Is she Linda B. Smith? Is she at Indiana?
Yeah, Indiana University.
Okay, just making sure. Also, I tried to pull up the page really quick. I'm going to share my screen really quick. Yeah, I guess it is. Okay. I think I'm going to look a little bit at, you may recall me talking about this paper, What Happened to Cognitive Science by Nunez. That, like, I think in the paper, I believe, he kind of points out that, like, yeah, the developmental aspect in cognitive sciences in general kind of didn't really it kind of got left out in favor of, like, more cognitivism and like, in terms of mainstream stuff.
Right.
So I kind of want to see. I'll go back because I know the Cognitive Science Society, or whoever wrote the sort of rebuttal piece to this. I wonder if they comment on that any of the specific, because what they were doing, and I don't have it up right now, but what they were doing is in response to this critical paper, they were like, oh, well, here's an example of recent papers that have been published that address all the different aspects of cognitive science and whatever. And I wonder if that's been addressed in one of those response papers or response category collection of things, because that might offer some insight into where we're going here. But yeah, I would say Anthony's questions kind of has been answered. But like, there are people like that's sort of a big thing from. That's why I talk about Joshua Tenenbaum. Like, I think he's somebody who is maybe not in the cognitive science sense. Yes, I don't know about the developmental sense, and like, I think what Bradley's alluding to, and kind of things that I'm interested in terms of my own. Frontier map and reorganizing cognitive science studies, it would definitely be more incorporating these sorts of things of development and developmental biology, and even the article I mentioned before about using synthetic biology and those areas. And I feel like there is a space there to be staked out. I think, as Bradley said, But there's not. I don't really think there's this clear. We're really getting at some of the gaps between the traditional fields. I'm sure if like Jean Piaget, how do you say it?
Piaget.
Piaget was around now and like fully computationally embedded in stuff, I'm pretty sure he'd be interested in this sort of a thing. But he didn't. He did a lot of great stuff a long time ago. But there's not really, it's an interesting time because looking at the trajectories of deep learning and connectionism in AI. There's I think it's a very interesting area in terms of where things are, where things have been. But part of what I'm trying to do is figure out those ins and outs more so. Excuse me, but yeah, I'll just say I'm going to go back to. I know this is sort of the first one that we talked about it here in the group, but like, I'm probably going to go back and look at what Bradley said so I can learn how to talk about it better myself. Because it is sort of a new approach to things. But yeah, it's good.
And yeah, I think that would be useful if we could put together like a list of different maybe papers and potential fields to investigate.
Yeah.
Because, you have things like one of the papers we cite in the developmental Brainbird vehicles paper is like by McClelland. So it's like an early connectionist paper, but it's called developmental connectionism. And so they sort of stake out some area there where you can like develop a neural network. But then there isn't really much after, like the papers that is cited by, there aren't too many that follow up on that work. So it's like kind of peters out in the 90s. And then, so it's like people take stabs at it and then it kind of goes by the wayside for whatever, maybe because it isn't in the mainstream of cognitive science or whatever. And so I think it would be good at least to have like a list of readings that we could at least look, what fields are maybe where people are doing interesting things. It may not even be like cognitive science. It could be like developmental robotics or, developmental, like even like developmental psychology where, it isn't really applied to robots or computers, but it's interesting. And developmental biology, I think, is a lot of, there's a strain in like that area where people are looking at morphogenesis and they're looking at like self-organization. So they're looking at things like, cellular automata that are like generating these cool things that are sort of look like they're alive, and they might be learning some things. They're learning some rules and learning from rules, but we don't really think of that as like an AI or like anything that's relevant to the brain necessarily. So there are these areas where there's this sort of weird, like, it's sort of like you can see the inspiration, but it's beyond that. It's hard to see how it fits together. So there's a lot of stuff. It's like I think maybe that hasn't been put together in the way that we would like, like in a technical way. Like, what is the actual connection here? How can this be useful?
I'm curious do you know anything, do you know more about like what the symbolic natural feature linguistic approach might be? Or, I mean, even no, maybe not necessarily linguistic, but the innate feature, like what do you know any authors or keywords?
Actually, if you go back to that gradient, let me see if I can find it. The gradient pub that I shared earlier in the meeting, that article on, let me go back, I'll share my screen actually. This gradient article on compositionality kind of gets into this topic a bit, where they talk about, cats and Fodor, the question of innateness. And so they go into this idea of compositionality, and they talk about like, so there's Chomsky, who does a lot of stuff with, language. There's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and there are a lot of, there's a huge debate in or historical debate in linguistics about this topic. So there's this idea that, are children acquiring grammars, or are they born with this, an ability for a grammar, and what is, how is it acquired in childhood, and then how does that reflect what they know in adulthood? So, yeah.
Who was like just to kind of give this background? I think Bradley knows a lot more of this than I do, but Chomsky became very famous critiquing a specific. Was it Skinner? Was it who did he critique with his? It's a big debate in cognitive science and linguistics in general. But like Chomsky became famous because he really critiqued the hell out of a certain book and idea, and I forget whose it was. Do you remember?
I can't remember it now. It's not my core area, but yeah.
It was it came up in one part of my own like research, whatever. But like Chomsky became famous because I think he was sort of attacking the I want to say sort of the blank slate something or other, but he came with the idea of universal. Oh, we just lost Anson.
Oh, he'll be back probably.
Well, I was saying he came with the idea of universal grammar, or is it universal syntax? I forget.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, there is that debate. Yeah, it's so yeah. That's just one example, and there are other sort of examples, I think, in developmental psychology of like learning in general, how innate that is, like category learning and things like that.
Yeah, and there are people, but honestly, there are not. I don't know, like a big list of people who are focusing on those kind of things. Like I think, okay, Josh Tenenbaum, and there are certain people also like who came up at the MIT Brains, Minds, and Machines. Like there are people who are doing like adjacent stuff, but I feel like what I would like to do myself is kind of break this down into like you have people that are very focused on, and rightly so, computer vision. Okay, like computer vision is people. There's a lot of focus on that because it's vision as the gateway to even, and what I didn't understand, like to be honest, I was a little bit like, okay, everybody talks about computer vision, I'm not that interested in it, but what I'm getting is like vision as a foundation for creating these sort of cognitive spaces. Its relation to language, its relation to cognitive capacity and differentiation based on how information is visually processed. And the eye is a big source of information. Okay, but there's computer vision, which is a huge thing, and like ImageNet and classification is like what everything now is related to that kind of classification. But there are other aspects of things. There is a developmental aspect. There is evolutionary robotics. There is synthetic biology. There are people who are, intentionally trying to look at, like Dr. Tenenbaum often describes his knowledge, his research, like how do children go from no, you don't have to give them a million examples. They can just generate and very easily manipulate and find categories or whatever as they develop. And like that sort of, it's using it in a computational cognitive science way. Jean Piaget was doing this a long time ago. And how do children learn, and what stage can they understand certain things? One of my friends, Greg Smith, I forget his last name right now. I should talk to him again. He's really interested in this stuff. He's a PhD student, I believe, in Maryland. But there's not really like, there are many different angles of approach, and I don't think there's yet, like if you're climbing a mountain, I don't think there's yet a clear path up the mountain yet. There are many people from many different sides of the mountain trying to climb it. If that makes sense.
Yes. I think it is. I think there are many different approaches, and I think maybe what is useful in some sense is to kind of figure out how they fit together. There are maybe things that some people are doing and other people are doing, and I don't know if that means that what's needed is like a systematic review, which is a big undertaking, or if it's just like taking inspiration from a couple of different areas and trying to do something, maybe like a conceptual work, or maybe some sort of programming thing that might be useful, that
Yeah.
might demonstrate the proof of concept. So that's there are a lot of ways that can be like done just to make it to get some attention in the broader community, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like systematic review, is that something that you want to do, Jesse, ultimately? Probably, but like that is like a multi-year.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that sort of like the Godfather inception idea behind Frontier Map, as I originally see it. It's like not necessarily like Frontier Map was kind of this attempt to start getting myself oriented, and I think will turn into kind of a general set of suggestions for how to orient yourself in what I would the general space of cognitive sciences, and that's cool. But also like what I'm trying to do long term is get a sense of what is going on in this area.
Right. Yeah.
What are the peaks that haven't been climbed? Without an analogy.
Yeah.
And how do you even just where's like a map of the region where you say, okay, well, this area hasn't really been explored yet, and here's sort of why or why not. So I mean, that's personally speaking, yeah, I'm probably going to try to go there long term, but in the shorter term, I think that'd be a little bit more.
Yeah.
You don't have to be. You can't, like, I can't, like I'm not just going to wait for 5 years and study everything and then start doing stuff. I'm going to be doing stuff in the meantime, and I think we're all on the same page of like, oh, I'd like to look at this aspect of it, so here's what I'm going to do to try to investigate this thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the best way to do that is just to like maybe a little bit more formally collect papers. So like, you might make like collect papers, but then like create like a bibliography with labels, so that we have the labels, and then you like you might label it according to the actual field that it's from, but you might also label it with other topics or maybe connections. And then
I think good.
Yeah, later we can like revisit that and see if we can build maybe a map of the what different fields are thinking about. So I mean that's another way forward too, is to have like a collection of resources, papers, and then classify the papers by different topics, tags, hashtag, or whatever they use, and then maybe build like a visualization where if people do this for like using network theory or something, where you look at like different topics and you look at the papers and how they relate. So you might have a co-citation network, or you might have like, oh, there's this group of papers that have to do with robotics, and another cluster have to do with like childhood, and another cluster inexplicably that have to do with like deep learning. How do we maybe bridge those together? I mean, that's like, again, this is kind of like the frontier map is sort of this evolving thing. We talked to think about like visualizations of the field in the talk that was at CSVConf on visualizing the field, maybe the history of the field, but also the structure of the field as well. So
yeah.
Which reminds me that post on the meta resource. I don't know if maybe we could talk to this guy and see what his long-term plans are for that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. So I wanted to maybe give about 5 more minutes to go over a couple things, just to keep them in the front of our minds here. So the first one is the NeuroMatch Academy GitHub site. So this is the NeuroMatch Academy GitHub site as it stands now, and I know you've all seen it. So the complexity of feedback loops is the project that we'll be talking about more maybe next week or the week after. I didn't talk about it this week, but I think Rashab is interested in doing some work on this, and then so that's ongoing. The epistemological directory for Neuromatch Academy. So this is still a thing, and we might actually incorporate the developmental stuff into this as a series of topics. So we had, when we were doing Neuromatch, we had this epistemological directory, which is just where you have the different subtopics or tags of different things like modeling, and we have some resources in here. We could very easily fit, I think, the developmental stuff into this, and just kind of like, for future reference for future Neuromatch academies, or even recycling the materials. If people go to this, there are topics that are maybe beyond what was in the Neuromatch Academy, but nevertheless, it might be something that people were wondering about. So it's useful to have those topics in here. So we could have one on development. We could have one on like innateness. Whatever, however you decide to do it, we can create those resources. There's another one, MLDL Metascience. So this is something that we also mentioned. So there's this set of papers that are coming out on like deep learn, sort of like the theory of deep learning, and like why is it that if you have a lot of layers to your network, why is it so effective? And so this is a topic that maybe we'll be exploring later. I put this separate from epistemological directories because it is kind of a separate topic, but it's maybe sort of Neuromatch Academy oriented. So this is for the pre-course. This might be useful next year. This is the slow anime pod. So there's nothing in here right now, but this would be the home for the slow anime pod. And I think, maybe we'll revisit that in coming meetings too. If we want to, I don't know how you want to do the slow anime pod, but we might actually do it in the meetings where we spend about 20 or 30 minutes on like a topic in the anime course material and go over it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be into that. I don't know if anybody else would, but Ash, would you want
Yeah, I'm fine, but I'm not really, so strong with the content as such. I can help you with stuff, but I don't think I can do it independently.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think we'll be presenting in a sense of like teaching everybody. More like let's just discuss stuff. Like, it'll be more like a learning experience for me anyway.
Yeah, then that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
I can do it.
I'm not like a expert by any means.
I could participate intermittently, but the semester is starting and I'm afraid of my classes, so it'll depend on how my classes go.
I would, for Anson, I would say I wouldn't approach it as like homework for you. More like you could review or just absorb stuff.
Yeah, I think the point of the slow anime was to make it like digestible to people. So I mean, it's really up to who in the group, who in that pod, what they want to get out of it. So it may be like, and I know that like they had talked amongst the anime people about how they wanted to make this as a renewable resource. So that means, not just for like future summer schools, but for anyone who wants to learn about a topic, to have all those materials there and to go over them at your own pace. So it definitely makes it like sort of customizable in that sense. And I would recommend, if you were going to do it in the meetings, to just have like a discussion. You could either review it before the meeting or just pick like one thing out of the lecture and say, this is a thing that I found really interesting. And then, maybe everyone does that, or maybe one person does it and other people comment on it. But I think that's useful because it's like, there are things there's so much content in there that it was overwhelming, I think, to a lot of people. And, there's just so much there to learn that sometimes you can't pull it out in a short period of time. You have to really kind of think about it and explore it. So that's definitely, I think, would be useful for not just the summer school, but for, even concurrent with your studies. So, yeah, so we still have the NeuroMatch repository, and we'll be revisiting that. The other thing is the MetaBrain models repository. So we have a bunch of things in the tasks here, and I've been sort of sorting this out. There's Super NeuroMatch, which is coming up at the end of October. We still have to talk about what to do for that. And this is like a conference, so it's kind of like it's a replacement for SFN, which was canceled. And so this is an opportunity to present, perhaps, individually, or I don't know how they're going to structure. Maybe the lab can produce something. I don't know how that's going to work, but we'll see. And let's just keep that in the back of our heads, put a pin in that so that we can think about the deadlines. If you want to submit something, we can go over the presentation in the meeting and make sure that it's all ready for the conference. We have Rishab, who's going to present soon. This blog post, never got to this, A-Life 2020. Blog post for iClear. This is something that is going to be, we talked about that earlier today. Agent-based modeling and NetLogo. This is, of course, something that
You can put that in hold for the time being.
Oh, the blog post?
The agent-based modeling one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The blog is definitely happening.
We'll put that on hold.
Yeah.
Ashk also mentioned that she might be presenting on that next month.
Yeah, I actually want to quote here that I am writing my GRE by September 20 or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, until then I just pause some of the stuff that I'm doing, but I would really do it.
Oh yeah.
But on 20th of September, I'm just holding things just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So there's an interest in that. We'll talk about that in future meetings. And then we have a lot of other things. I just like, if you want to review them, this is the board. There are things here that we, just kind of mention and we put a pin in it and we don't really get to it for a while. And then there's things that kind of are, I have another board where I have like a high priority deadline here between in progress and completed, but I didn't want to do that here because it's just kind of like we just want to get ideas on here. So there's stuff like a direct perception presentation, affordances presentation. That's Jesse. That's like those are from, I imagine, like just sort of things that you're working on.
Yeah, that was in like sort of the pre-NeuroMatch era, and those are definitely things that I'm interested in still, but are definitely still on hold for me.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's good. So that's, again, MetaBrain models. And again, we're constantly adding things into this fold. Just ideas that, like this idea here, allostasis machines. I was working on that this week. I'll probably present on that soon enough, maybe at Super NeuroMatch, but I don't know yet. And again, like there are all sorts of things that are just kind of like ideas that we had in different contexts. So those will come together maybe soon enough. And we can also talk about development in this area as well. I don't know, maybe more specific topics relative to the developmental fold. I don't think we're going to have time for papers. So let's see. Does anyone have anything else they want to mention before we go? Okay.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
And it's sort of related to similar, kind of copying off the idea of the slow NeuroMatch pod weekly stuff. And we can do that in the meeting if there's something here. But I know one thing, like, and Anson, feel free to give commentary on this because I know I didn't. I'm saying it now, but it's something I probably should have mentioned earlier. Well, like I know Anson and I were talking about. Anson's taking a course on artificial intelligence in the semester for school, right? And we were Anson and I were talking about how to best develop like some AI and machine learning stuff skill wise. And so I was thinking like potentially we could devote a small chunk of time in lab meetings or after lab meetings or whatever to discuss some of those materials because I'm trying to learn the same stuff as well, and I imagine some other people would benefit from like I don't know how we don't have to like link it necessarily to the coursework or whatever that Anson's doing, but just like hey, today I'm focusing on reinforcement learning or whatever it is that comes up. That'd be a way to sort of like an extra review session that we would all benefit from. So I'm just putting that out there as a potential thing to do that I know I would benefit from, and Anton probably would, and if depending on the people or Bradley is okay with it, that may be something start incorporating into things.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just try to let me know maybe a day before or something if you have a specific topic you want to cover. We can always devote time to it, but I just wanted to make sure that we have it sort of on the. Usually, I send the email out on Thursdays, so sometimes if you can get to me by then, I can put it on the agenda. Otherwise, because then it announces to everyone that that's happening that week, so they might show up. But otherwise, it's you're welcome to do the. I think that's a great idea. Definitely, if you can synergize with your coursework or whatever you're doing, that's excellent because that's that's where you're picking up your ideas. Like it's not just happening in a vacuum.
And just to reiterate, I don't mean like Anson's going to present us on what reinforcement learning is. More like, hey, here's a topic that I'm learning about. What do you guys think? Here's the question. Or I could talk about this. I've tried to learn about it, and I think Bradley's sort of interested in, advising how he can about things. So, yeah.
So, about that course, I'm going to evaluate it first.
Yeah, if you would get rid of it this point.
I got a prerequisite wave for it, and depending on how heavily it relies on prerequisite, I may switch it out for Spanish, which is, but we'll see. I'm currently leaning towards taking it. It's really fascinating, but if the coursework seems unrealistic for me, I'll switch it out. But I'll update you guys on how that goes.
Yeah, and it applies to any kind of STEM related thing here. But it sounds good.
Yeah.
Am I the only one hearing Anson talking? I mean, it echoes. Does anybody hear it?
I heard it. Oh, you mean not hearing him?
Yeah, I heard him, but I heard him whatever he spoke was kind of an echo. So I couldn't hear whatever he said.
Oh, so there was echoing.
A little bit, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard. I didn't hear an echo, but anyways, so yeah, that sounds good. So why don't we keep thinking about that, and let's try to do we can do one of the things. We don't have to do everything in 1 week, So we'll just kind of think these are things to think about for fall as we move into fall, and definitely it's hopefully we'll get some good stuff out of that. And if you feel like there people might be interested in the Salon MA pod, you can invite them. I think Jesse's kind of driving that.
Yeah, I'll be saying more about that within the next 2 weeks. Sorry, I feel like I really hyped it up, and then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm stepping out because I'm on vacation and doing some other stuff. So but yeah, I'll be doing more of that soon.
Okay.
And also, like the feedback project itself for anime is still there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that more in subsequent weeks. I didn't have anything prepared for it this week, but just wanted to get some catch up on some things. I think that's good. Okay, everyone, have a good week. And if you have some things to mention, if you have conversations you want to continue in Slack, please do so or put things in there and we can chat there. Otherwise, see you next week.
Goodbye.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming
Bye.
by. Take care.
Bye.
Happy fall-ish.
Yep.
Season change. Bye-bye.